Hey, I'm Berg and this is Psychedelic Actualization. On this channel we talk about topics like self-realization, self-actualization and working with psychedelics to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. In this video I want to report back about my experience at the ICPR, the Interdisciplinary Conference of Psychedelic Research. A little bit about me and my background. I've been working with psychedelics since I've been 16. And my journey has been mostly a journey of self-exploration. So I've been journeying a lot alone and with the context of self-actualization and self-realization, with the intentionality of spiritual exploration and of getting to know myself on a deeper level, and just curiosity about those psychedelic realms. And then a little bit later in my life, I managed to get into some communities with like-minded people, for example at rainbow gatherings, and more to the hippie side of the equation, you know? And lately I've been asking myself, I've been reading a lot of psychedelic literature, and I came across the Psychedelic Conference, and I'm like, it would be an interesting expansion of my experience to connect with the scientific community, because I have never connected or peeked into the scientific community of psychedelic research. And it's a very interesting field. So I just wanted to know what it was all about. And I just went to the ICPR near Amsterdam. And it was a very interesting, very great experience, very eye-opening experience as well, because I don't know anything about what's been going on in the scientific community. So let me explain and share my experience and my point of view and my perspective on what was going on at this conference. It's really interesting. So I have a little bit of notes. I will just go from one to the next. So first of all, there were a lot of speakers, a lot of talks. And for my personal opinion, it was way too many speakers that had way too little time for their talks. So all the talks and all the lectures were kind of rushed. Everybody had to rush through their presentations to get maybe a little bit of their point across. But it was not really... They didn't have the time to fully explain what they meant by their point that they wanted to share. So that was kind of sad. I wish there were less speakers and less topics, but more extensive talks with more detail and going into more depth. So that was kind of a sad thing, but I can understand, of course, as well that they wanted to get as many speakers as possible and cover a lot of topics, which was also kind of nice to get sneak peeks into a lot of different topics. So, and it's interesting. There were kind of a lot of different people at the conference. There were psychiatrists and psychedelic researchers and also a few hippies or just curious people like myself who were interested in the topic. But overall, I sensed that there is a scientific bubble that people are acting in. It's a weird bubble, just like the hippies are acting in their own little hippie world bubble. Everybody is like in their own bubble and moving around in this limited space and not really peeking into other areas or other bubbles of the psychedelic community, which was interesting. For example, in the scientific bubble, in the scientific community, I've recognized a weird terminology. Of course, it's science. Of course, they want to present the psychedelic research in a scientific way to the world and to the media, maybe. But sometimes it just got a little bit pseudo-intellectual. It's like pseudo-intellectual garbage. You know, it's like trying to sound intellectual and smart, but actually not saying anything. So that was kind of weird, or sometimes it just got a little bit like very scientific, so that the general public just couldn't understand. Like if you would explain it to a kid, the kid wouldn't know what you mean. And I think there is value in the psychedelic scientific terminology, but I think there's also value in a terminology for the general public, or for example for kids. If you could explain it to a kid or to somebody who has had no academic background and doesn't have a PhD, then you can get across your point more and better. And it also shows that when you can explain it in a simpler terminology, that you understand the topic. There's no real need for the scientific terminology, I guess. But that's just how I felt and my opinion. But of course, a certain sense of scientific and academic terminology and language is kind of nice. It is also valuable, and it explains some aspects of the experience in a clear way. So that was one point that I noticed. And then also from the different speakers, I resonated most with the elders, like with Rick Doblin or Paul Stamets, and some other like old people who are kind of very experienced and very long in that field and having done that work for like 30 or 40 years. Those people were like cutting through the bullshit, and in their talks they were talking about like just crazy stuff and just like very clear and to the point, and it just resonated with me very, very much, because there was not much academic bullshit going on. It was just clear and to the point, and in just like very, I don't know how to explain it, but very down to earth and kind of very respectful towards the psychedelics. And then there were other people. Other talks, of course, were also amazing about philosophy and naturalism and all that kind of shebang. Some talks were amazing, but some talks were also very, I don't know, very surface level kind of talks. And psychedelics research, psychedelic studies, I'm astonished by the quality of the studies that we're doing. I mean, I kind of get it. I understand that it is very difficult work, that it is also difficult in regards to legality and the policies and bureaucracy and what we are allowed to do and what the scientific academic community is allowed to do in the studies. So it is kind of course, great work that we are doing. But I realized, and I didn't knew, I kind of knew before, but I realized even more on this conference, it's like, we're at the very beginning stages of psychedelic research. It's like at the very, 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 very beginning stages of psychedelic research. And that was astonishing to me. That was something new to me. Because some people were sharing studies, like proper studies about, I don't know, how psilocybin affects creativity or something. And then they were seriously saying that they have had 8 participants in that study. And all of the participants had, it's like this weird, it's difficult work, but it's this weird concept of building up a study. And it's difficult, yeah. But like, for example, 8 people participating in the study. All of them had prior psychedelic experience. And then half of them were given a placebo or half placebo. And it's a double-blind study. It's like, I'm thinking to myself, if they had prior psychedelic experience and they were given a placebo, in the half-hour mark, they know that they were given the placebo, and then they had to go through all the tasks of proving or measuring creativity in a kind of scientific way. I don't know, really. I don't know if the results from that study are like, are like valuable. I don't know. I really don't. Because sometimes when I've been in hippie communities or going around in other circles or just from my own experience, I've had more participants in studies and explorations of creativity, just like in a circle of friends, you know? So yeah, that's kind of difficult. Then also there are people researching and making studies on the effects of psychedelics on animals. I didn't know that that was still a thing. Like astonishing stuff that I didn't know that existed, that still existed. And it's interesting to get a sneak peek into the scientific academic work and the community. For example, there was this one study, they were testing 5-MeO-DMT on rats. And the rats were giving the 5-MeO-DMT, and the result of the study was that they've been out of body, they've not been moving for 8 minutes or something. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, what did the rats say afterwards? How was it? Like, what kind of information can we get out of that experiment? So there have been studies like that, but there have been also a lot of very interesting, very nice studies of like, for example, at ayahuasca retreats, they've been doing some work with like researching and doing surveys on hundreds of participants and recognizing if they can intentionally relive a traumatic childhood experience and if that would come up in that experience, or very interesting stuff like that, or loneliness during COVID, with psychedelic users, with non-psychedelic users. So very interesting studies as well, and very interesting people. And regarding the people, it was very interesting like to observe and to talk with a lot of people and observe the level of experience that different people have. Because I realized I was one of the more experienced people at that conference, and I was also surprised by some level of experience by, for example, scientific researchers or just by students. For example, there was this one guy, very nice guy that I met at the hostel. And he was studying biology or something, and he wanted to write his bachelor's or something on psilocybin. And I'm like, great, like, what are your experiences with psilocybin? And he's like, yeah, I've had, I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but maybe he had one experience and he was afraid to have another one. And I'm like, oh, and you're writing like your scientific studies on psilocybin. And I like, this is amazing. And I was talking to another one, to a psychologist or a therapist, and she's like, yeah, I want to, or people like, yeah, I want to implement psychedelics in psychiatry. And I'm like, this is great. Like, what is your level of experience? Like, what is your approach? I was like, yeah, I've had some LSD experiences at parties or at raves, like, and at which doses? I'm like, they were like, I don't know. I just took the LSD that was given to me, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, on my personal path of self-exploration, of psychedelic exploration, I've been having a more scientific approach of taking psychedelics, of like measuring the doses, writing down what happened at what happens at which dosages. And some of those people who want to do this great work, they're just at the very beginning of their own psychedelic explorations. And that is very interesting. That was very surprising to me, that people who are doing this work don't have extensive experiences themselves. And they're just, some of them at least, are just like relying on other studies or on what they've read in books or seen in documentaries, and then have some experiences at raves or something. But of course, this is all very generalized. There are, of course, also the other people a lot of other people who have a scientific, mature approach to psychedelics and to this work, and have a serious intent in furthering the research. Of course, there's always both, but it's interesting just to what I discovered in conversations with different people, or a lot of the people. That was kind of cute because it reminded me of myself, or like having their first ayahuasca experience or something, and I talked to them and they're like, yeah, I had one ayahuasca experience and now I'm called to be a shaman, and now I'm called to be a psychedelic therapist. And I've been there. I've been there after my first ayahuasca experience. When I was 17 or 18. I had the calling, I had the idea, like, yeah, I want to be a shaman, I want to be a psychedelic psychotherapist and do psychedelic assisted therapy. But then I was like thinking a little bit further. I was like, maybe I have to gain a little bit more experience with the medicine before I embark on the journey of helping others through their experiences. And then I embarked on my own journeys a little bit deeper and realized, this goes very deep. It's like when you just have like a handful of experiences, you have no clue basically what the potential of these realms are. So that's at least my perspective, my approach, that if you go into a little bit of more serious research or guiding therapy sessions, you should have extensive experience with in those realms. So that was kind of interesting to see, like, even just students or people in higher positions having less experience than myself, or way less experience, and of course there were people who had way more experience. So that was nice. So overall, I think in the overall field of psychedelic research is like we can do a lot better, but we are on the way to better. So this conference and these conferences and these meetups are ways of discussing different perspectives and opinions, and that is very valuable in bringing us forward, because there are people whose perspective are seriously to remove the spiritual aspect or the mystical aspect of the psychedelic experience to just have the therapeutic or the brain chemistry effect of the substance, which is crazy to me. But then there are also, of course, people who are giving talks just especially against it, specifically against that statement. There are people, it's like so many different perspectives and very interesting discussions that came from that. So yeah, that was basically it. A very valuable insight for me was that was the reason, that was the intention. You can watch the video about intentionality right here. My intention or one of my intentions to go to this conference was to see if I would like to go into psychedelic research. And a valuable insight for myself was I am definitely not passionate about psychedelic research and academic work, or working in the academic field with psychedelics. It is a very interesting field, it is a very nice field, but like just feeling into the conversations that I had with like the people who are finishing up their masters and wanting to do a PhD or something and related to that field, or just like connecting with those cute geeks that were geeking out about the scientific side of psychedelic exploration. It just didn't resonate with me. So that was very valuable for me to gain that insight, to know now that I'm not as passionate about psychedelic research as other people, or at least like academic psychedelic research. Of course, I'm researching psychedelics for myself intensively and excessively because I'm very passionate about psychedelic research. But what's more important for me is like to provide meaningful experiences one-to-one or in groups to other people, to educate people and to share the medicine one-to-one and to transform somebody's life in a way that is meaningful to them, and doing that through guided psychedelic sessions. So that is just my standpoint right now, and that was my experience at the psychedelic conference ICPR, a little bit of my perspective about it. Very interesting. What are your thoughts about psychedelic science, psychedelic research, the point that we are at? It's like psychedelic research is just starting again after a long break, which is great, and it's a very great field. I would like to know, what is your standpoint on that? Where are you standing on that? Are you standing more in the hippie bubble, or more in the solo exploration bubble, or more in the scientific academic bubble? What is your position? Write down in the comment section down below. If you want to know more about my journey with psychedelics, then subscribe to the channel. You can check it out. There are a lot of life experiences, trip reports, and insights about spirituality and self-actualization on my channel. If you want, you can follow along and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, Psychedelic Actualization, and you can donate via PayPal and support my work. There's going to be great things coming in the future on this channel, so stay tuned for that. And now let's have a party. Yeah, the after party. The after party was amazing as well. I was even being recognized at the conference from this channel, which was very nice. Which was, I love that. Very blessings to you, brother. Forgot your name. But very nice to be recognized, and having the after party, like dancing beside Paul Stamens on the dance floor, a little bit high on LSD. Very nice. And the overall theme for me was, actually I wanted to go to find a mentor, and I ended up meeting this really beautiful woman, which is also mysterious ways of reality and of God leading us and connecting us with different people. But very glad how everything turned out. Very nice experience, and I'll see you in the next one. Much love.